Hey everyone, we are live from NRF, the National Retail Federation big show in New York City, and it's an exciting time in retail. We have an expert from UiPath to talk about the transformative effect of AI and automation in retail. Nasir, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me on here, Evan. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for being here. Day one of NRF. Pretty exciting time in retail. Maybe give us some perspective on the show, and also for those who may not be familiar with UiPath and you and your role and
Sure.
mission in the company, introductions as well.
Sure. So for everyone joining the show, my name is Nasir Farasta. I help lead our retail practice here at UiPath. For those of you who aren't familiar with UiPath, we are a end-to-end automation platform. So when you think about any business process that you might be running throughout your organization, whether that's onboarding, whether that's invoice reconciliation, whether you're doing things in the insurance industry, but for retail specifically, oftentimes it's about those onboarding experiences, the reconciliation, the inventory management, really help stitch together those end-to-end processes and all those different systems that you might be interacting with. And all of that swivel chair movement that you have happening that your folks are doing, right, that they didn't sign up to do. And so why not have automation really help alleviate that burden for them? So that's really kind of where we focused in on within the retail space so far.
Brilliant. And as we move to an increasingly AI-driven automated world, UiPath is there to help. Maybe describe some of the current market challenges you're hearing
Sure.
and seeing from customers, and what they're telling you at NRF.
Yeah. So I've had quite a few conversations with customers so far where they've really described kind of like the disparate tech stack that they live in, right? And how important it is for them to get people into the organization, deliver the right goods at the right time for their customers. And they're sitting on this treasure trove of data, and they just don't know how to really take advantage of that as quickly as possible, right? And so they're looking at different solutions that are out there. They're looking at how can we optimize our existing investments in our ERP system, in our CRMs, in our onboarding systems, our HR systems as well. And something that I've heard from all of them is, hey, look, our investments, our technology partners are trying to make an effort to optimize their environments. But what we're struggling with right now is really stitching it all together, right? It's great that they're making advancements here, but how do we really aggregate all of this goodness and make it actionable for our teams, right? How do we really just improve that experience for our internal teams and for really our customers? Because at the end of the day, they want to provide the best experience possible for those stakeholders. And so it's been some really interesting conversations, especially around the orchestration element. And I think that's something that, I had a session yesterday with a couple of our customers up on stage where we talked about the future and where are we going, right? And a lot of people are familiar with automation in that traditional sense, right? Task-based automation, doing bits and pieces of a end-to-end process. And so when we start to talk about, well, how do we stitch that together, and where does UiPath's role in? And that agnostic capability to work across your environment, provide our own capabilities to enhance those investments, to really make you more effective and efficient, that's really started to resonate with a lot of people. They're like, hey, we're not going to rip and replace our ERP system. We're not going to rip and replace our CRM system, but we want to make it better. We want to really make sure that we're delivering things in the best way you possibly can. And so I think kind of that messaging around, well, hey, that's great. It's great that you have these systems. It's great that they're making advancements. Let us help you stitch it all together so you can truly transform your process end to end and not just, bits and pieces along the way.
Brilliant. So you mentioned some real world examples of where UiPath automation is helping transform retail operations without calling out any favorite children. Do you care to talk about any examples or anecdotes or customers even that you're working with?
Yeah, sure. I was on stage yesterday with PepsiCo and Tapestry,
Oh, wow.
and PepsiCo shared a really great example around their onboarding experience specifically. They have a ton of consultants that they have to hire every month, every week, every year, and it's a very manual process, right? So as a consultant comes in, you need to make sure that they have access to the right systems, that they are set up in payroll, that they're set up in your HCM tool, that they have access to the point of sale, for example, right? So being able to kind of alleviate that burden of as soon as someone is saying, yep, I've accepted this offer, great. Well, let's take that information from that offer that you've signed, take that data, and let's start plugging them into where they need to go to really alleviate that pressure. And I think Mark was the guy from PepsiCo. He mentioned that this used to take them days to do, and that they would have 8 to 10 people whose jobs were not to actually onboard people. Their jobs were something completely else, but they had to spend the time to do it. And instead, they leveraged UiPath in order to help with bringing in that information and helping to speed up that onboarding process, where they're now doing it in hours, right? So the savings just in time alone is tremendous. But then you also take that and you think about the compliance efforts, right? You think about the risk around entering information incorrectly. You think about payroll, making sure people are getting paid on time and accurately. So really, it starts to compound in the benefits that they've experienced. So that's one example that Mark shared with us yesterday on stage.
Wow, brilliant. Wish I could have been there. And it sounds like there are a lot of themes that are stressing retailers these days. I mean, inventory management, supply
Yep.
chain challenges continue.
Yeah.
What's the role of AI in areas maybe like document processing, or what are the specific use cases that you're
Yeah.
hearing most?
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples. One is a retail customer of mine. I'm not going to name names, but they are a very large retailer, and they have multiple warehouses where they have their items being stored, whether they're shoes, clothes, whatever it may be, right? And when a customer orders something from them from their online e-commerce platform, they promise, hey, we're going to get it to you within 2 to 5 days, right? And sometimes what happens is that item that the customer orders ends up being out of stock. So now there's a delay in being able to ship that item to the customer. And so now they have to go in and they see, okay, we look up this item, it's out of stock here. Where else is it in stock? So now they have to automatically go in, search across maybe 5, 6, 7 different warehouse management systems for each one of their warehouses and see, okay, which warehouse is closest that can deliver this item so we can fulfill our promise to get this item on time to the customer who's expecting it, because that's the promise we made to them. So an example of that was where being able to leverage automation to say, okay, here's what our inventory looks like in this warehouse. Let's say it's missing, let's say it's out of stock. Well, let me automatically look up that order number and that item number across our 7 different warehouse management systems that don't speak to each other, and then find out which is the warehouse that has that item that can now be rerouted to the warehouse that can deliver and fulfill that order. So almost think about it as network rebalancing, right? Being able to leverage the data that's out there and using automation in order to help fulfill that customer order. Another example that we see a lot of is around invoices and POs, right? So oftentimes there's that PO reconciliation process that comes along where an email might come in and say, okay, here's the PO. Does it match up to what that customer ordered? We have to open up the email, search the attachment, look it up in our ERP or our warehouse management system, oftentimes both places. And we have to do a manual reconciliation of, does this actually track? Does this match up to what we're looking for? And so again, a very manual effort. Well, leveraging UiPath's AI capabilities, you're able to actually read and ingest those documents, both structured and unstructured, to extract that relevant information, do that search along the way within those systems, and then say, yep, this matches up. And then what we see in today's world, if there's an exception, let's say an invoice number is off because there's a dash in between the 1 and the 2. But in the ERP, it just says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And on the invoice, it says 1 dash 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, in today's world, the AI is going to say, hey, look, this looks similar, but let me give it to a person to review and manage and say, yep, that's good. Let's move ahead. Where we're going is using agents instead, where the agents are using those same standard operating procedures, those same knowledge-based articles that the employees are using to reconcile and to understand if this is something that can move forward. You're actually using the agents and giving them, a sense of control to agency. You're saying, hey, follow these parameters. Here's the data that you need. Here's the tools that you have access to in order to execute this process. So keeping the bounds within it. So you're kind of combining that deterministic capability of automation and RPA along with the probabilistic outcomes that you need a person to start to think through, bringing those two things together and allowing the agent to say, yep, that matches. But even then, you might say, you know what, before an agent makes a decision, let's still have a person review it and make sure that is actually accurate. And so serving it back to a person saying, hey, I found all this information. It fits within the guidelines. It's not over the remittance allowance. I think it should be approved. Human, what do you think? Yep, that's right. And now the agent can learn from that. So the next time it sees it, because it has memory, right? So it's fine tuning itself. It's learning, is this right? Is this wrong? The next time it encounters something similar, it can proceed automatically, right? So we start here, and now we start to see the evolution of bringing in agentic as well. So the opportunities really are boundless, and it's both awesome to see all these different opportunities that we can really help with, and it's also overwhelming, right? Because it's, wow, what can't we do? Well, that's where we can help you kind of fine tune and figure out where should we get started, what should we really be thinking about. But hopefully those two examples help paint a picture for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's great to see it's not just an opportunity for consumer and customer experience, but for employee experience. And clearly, employees are really overwhelmed and sort of stressed out these days. And there's a lot of staffing challenges, and a lot of employees have to deal with kind of legacy systems with questionable
Yeah.
UI and user experiences. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that's a big push as well, to really automation can improve and support these employees in the field.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, right? Like these systems that were created, especially homegrown systems, they were created with the best of intentions, right? They were created because the company saw a need, they wanted to fulfill it, they wanted to make things easier for their employees. But over time, as the company evolves, as the processes change, as the environment evolves as well, well, now you're stuck facing this reality that, okay, do we invest our resources and our time to completely rehaul and the system, or can we leverage automation and our technology in order to just make the experience better, right? So how can we alleviate that burden on the employees in order to leverage automation to just make it a better experience, right? Let the automation interact with those terrible UIs and the old legacy green screens and shuttling data back and forth. Let it retrieve that information for you. Let it make it easy for you so you can go back to doing what you actually were hired to do and what you enjoy doing, right? Which is providing that best in class customer experience that's going to move the needle and drive that revenue for your organization.
Brilliant. So you're meeting lots of retailers who, might have amazing stores and storefronts and offers and employees, but maybe they're not, tech savvy like an Amazon or an e-commerce giant. They don't have hundreds of developers or engineers on staff. What advice would you have for retailers maybe just starting a journey around AI, agentic AI, automation, and related areas? How do you kind of
Yeah,
start this process?
absolutely. Um, you know, I always think about every customer interaction and even my own personal interactions. When someone's explaining something to me, it's like, you know what? Let's just assume that we're all third graders. Let's just start there. Let's just get educated. Let's all get on the same page and let's build that knowledge together, right? So let's get everybody comfortable. So my advice would be first educate yourself, right? Understand what's available out there, understand what are the capabilities that you're looking for. But ultimately, it always has to tie back to a business problem. So what are the strategic initiatives that your company is really pushing for? And then what are the areas within those strategic initiatives that you might be responsible for, right? Because they're always going to break down into smaller components. Well, let's start there and tie it back to something strategic. Because at the end of the day, the business wants to solve the problems, and they don't necessarily, care how the problem gets solved. They just want the problem to be solved, right? And then you can partner as well with your technical teams who are going to want to understand, well, what's the architecture look like? What are the things that we have to worry about from a security and governance perspective? How does this platform fit into that? How can we further enhance the investments that we've made today in order to make them more effective? So you start to bridge those two things together, right? From the business side and the technical side. But honestly, like my number one thing is let's just start with educating yourself and being prepared to understand like what's available today, where are we going, and what's our company's strategy? Are we aligning towards things that we're focusing on that are going to actually move the needle? Because if there isn't that business value around it either, then then it just becomes like, hey, this is a nice to have. But you really want to make sure you're driving towards something that's a need to have that the company can really get behind.
Wow, that's quite a mic drop moment. So on that note, we'll let you get back to the busy show floor at NRF. Sounds just like an amazing week, probably the biggest NRF in years. And
Yeah.
congratulations on all the success, onwards and upwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Evan. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the
Thanks
time.
so much. And thanks everyone for listening, watching, sharing. Take care.